There has been quite a response to Israel's escalation. And Netanyahu spoke about pressure, and it was pressure that has forced him to allow 8 trucks into the Gaza Strip. And that pressure is partly coming from the US, I guess, but also from the UK, Canada, and France, who issued a joint statement basically saying, Israel has crossed a red line. And they went as far as to say that there will be, and I quote, if Israel does not cease the renewed military offensive and lifts its restrictions, we will take further concrete actions in response. So they mentioned that twice. We will take further concrete actions without specifying what those concrete actions will be. So I mean, when I read that, of course, yes, it's harsher than it normally is, the tone and the language. But isn't this exactly the kind of mealy-mouthed comments which emboldens the like of Smotrich, and to say things like, we are destroying everything that remains in Gaza, and the world isn't able to stop us?
Yes, yes, very much so. I mean, one need only compare the response of these countries and their allies in the EU and so on to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for example, which, regardless of its numerous illegalities and atrocities and so on, no one is even claiming constitutes a genocide. Here you have a genocide that places states and governments under an obligation not only to punish the perpetrators, but to prevent genocide. And what do we have now? A statement by 3 heads of government, basically saying 19 months in, I should add, which is not insignificant. If this goes on, there will be consequences, with absolutely no indication of what those consequences may be. And Israel understands better than anyone that this is really a kind of charade, a pantomime. It has no problem with being criticized. It has no problem with being condemned even by its closest allies, because it understands that certainly at this stage, words are thoroughly meaningless. It is only actions that are relevant. And so to threaten with consequences without indicating what those might be and so on is really meaningless. That's my first observation. My second is that we now have actually a concrete action taken today by the government of Great Britain. Its Foreign Secretary David Lammy, speaking to what appears to be a rather disappointed House of Commons, stated that the consequence that the Starmer government is imposing on Israel is to suspend negotiations on a UK-Israeli free trade agreement. Now, it's recently been revealed that British weapons deliveries to Israel increased, I think, threefold, tripled since Starmer came to power. Um, the UK continues to welcome illegal products from illegal settlements in the illegally occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip and Golan Heights. And so the British consequence has been to say, we will continue to give you everything that we're giving you, but we're going to withhold from you something that we haven't given you. I mean, it's a charade. It's an exercise in smoke and mirrors, which that I have to admit, the British are quite proficient at, as we've seen over the centuries in multiple locations on the globe. But if these are the consequences, Israel, the message that Israel will receive is keep up the good work. We have your back. Having said that, there, I think, also several interesting aspects here. There has been a clear change of tone, and we're now seeing, for example, the European Union meeting to consider whether or not Israel is violating human rights, which, I mean, an absurd premise, but nonetheless, the fact that this meeting is convened, the fact that there is consideration of revoking Israel's preferential trade privileges with the European Union, the fact that at least some governments are proposing that sanctions should be focused not only, on these individual violent settlers, but really on those in power that sponsor and enable them, like government ministers. It's a very clear change in tone, and that explains, I think, why Israel is so alarmed, because it has enjoyed such thorough impunity for so long that even the slightest challenge rings alarm bells in Tel Aviv. And I think what will be most concerning to the Israelis is their fear that these governments are not acting on their own, but as they have done so often in the past, have sought and received permission from Washington to act as they have, because ultimately, the one country that Israel cares for more than any other, more than any all the others combined, is the United States. And here it's a little difficult to divine what is happening in Washington because we're hearing so many contradictory reports, but there are indications that Washington's patience with Israel is running low.